You see, the trouble begins when we believe we are supposed to be carried, that someone, somewhere, is meant to come along with lantern in hand and lead us gently through the dark. But life is far too wild for that. It does not arrive with instructions. It does not hand us a map. Life is not a shepherd. It is the mountain itself, vast, indifferent, and profoundly beautiful. And the mountain, you see, owes us nothing. It will not kneel down to make the climb easier. It will not whisper encouragement when our knees tremble. It stands in its silent majesty, unmoved by our fears, and yet that very indifference is its greatest gift. Now imagine this. A woman stands at the base of that mountain. The air is cold, the path uncertain. There is no hand to hold, no voices calling her name from above, no one behind her saying, "Go on, you can do it," just silence and herself. The quiet stretches out like eternity, and for a moment she hesitates. But here is the marvelous thing. She climbs anyway. You see, the strength of a real woman is not forged in comfort. It is carved from solitude. It is shaped by the slow fire of being unseen, unappreciated, even unloved, and continuing anyway. Her power is not born from praise, but from persistence, from the quiet decision to rise again, even when no one is watching. She becomes like the ocean. You can take from her, abandon her shores, throw stones at her waves, and still she moves, gracefully, powerfully, without apology. The world tells her, you need support to succeed. You need love to be whole. You need others to validate your worth. But these are illusions, mist upon the surface of the water. When she dives beneath them, when she lets the noise of the world fall away, she discovers something ancient and immovable. The self that does not beg, does not perform, does not collapse. The self that simply is. And when she stands in that awareness, when she truly feels it, she understands. Lack is not the enemy. Loneliness is not a punishment. These are invitations. Invitations to become still, to listen, to unlearn the nonsense of dependency, and remember what she has always been, complete. We are taught from the beginning to believe in rescue stories, that somewhere, someone will appear to lift us from our struggle. But what if the real story is the one where the hero never comes and she doesn't wait? What if the dragons were never enemies but mirrors? What if isolation isn't exile but initiation? So when there is no support, she builds her own foundation. When there is no love, she becomes it. When there is no one to lean on, she finds balance in her own spine. She does not rise because she is helped. She rises because she stopped waiting to be. Now, this isn't a rejection of love or connection, number. It is simply the realization that such things are best shared, not sought. They are additions, not requirements. A woman who rises alone does not rise bitter. She rises clear, clear that love is beautiful, but not a crutch. That support is welcome, but not salvation. That solitude is not suffering, but sacred space. In the end, she is not defined by who was absent, but by who she became when she stood alone. Solitude, though, is often misunderstood. In a world that glorifies connection, collaboration, and constant communication, being alone can appear like a failure. People assume that if you walk by yourself, you must be lost. If you are silent, you must be sad. But solitude is not emptiness. It is fullness waiting to be discovered. It is not a void, but a vessel. It is within solitude that transformation begins, when all distractions fall away and the masks we wear for others dissolve. Something miraculous happens. You finally meet yourself, not the self you present to the world, but the raw, untamed being beneath it all, the one that breathes in silence and listens without needing to speak. When a woman finds herself alone, stripped of the noise and support of the world, she is invited into a sacred encounter, an encounter with the core of her being. The world outside demands roles and performances. Be this kind of person, act this way, seek approval, seek love. But in solitude, none of these demands exist. There is only her. There is only presence. And that presence, though quiet, is powerful. It reveals the truth that has always been there, that she is enough, that she does not need to earn her right to exist, to be seen, or to be loved. Solitude becomes the mirror where she finally recognizes herself, not the reflection the world crafted, but the truth she has carried all along. This realization is not always comfortable. The silence can be terrifying because it leaves no place to hide, but that's the point. It strips away the unnecessary. It burns through illusion. It is a purification by stillness. And so she learns to sit with it, to sit with the ache, the emptiness, the uncertainty, and discover that none of these are enemies. They are teachers. Each moment alone chisels away what is false until only the essential remains. This is where strength begins, not in resistance but in surrender, not in noise but in quiet. True strength is the ability to stand in one's own company and not flinch, to look inward and say, "This is who I am," and it is enough. Solitude, then, is not exile. It is initiation. It is the first step on the path toward remembering what was never lost, the unbroken, undivided self that has been there all along, waiting beneath the noise of the world, beneath the expectations, beneath the fear. She does not become strong by being carried. She becomes strong by realizing she never needed to be. There comes a moment, often quiet and unannounced, when she realizes the climb has no destination, that the mountain she feared is not something to conquer, but something to understand. Each step upward is not toward a peak waiting to be claimed, but toward a deeper unfolding of herself. The wind no longer feels like resistance. It becomes rhythm. The solitude no longer feels like silence. It becomes language. It speaks in ways the world never could, whispering truths not found in noise or approval. In that space, she begins to see how much of her life has been spent reaching outward, reaching for hands that could not hold her, for words that could not fill her, for validation that could never last. We are raised, after all, in a culture of mirrors. We learn to measure our worth by reflection, how we are seen, loved, acknowledged. But reflections are fragile. They change with light, with time, with the eyes that look upon them. And when those eyes turn away, what remains? What remains is the self that was never reflected, but always there. The silent observer behind every thought, the stillness beneath every storm. When she begins to live from that stillness, the world changes shape. Things that once seemed essential begin to lose their urgency. The need to prove, to please, to chase slowly dissolves like fog under morning sun. In its place grows something steadier, peace without permission, confidence without applause. It is a strange freedom, the kind that feels almost unnatural at first, because she has been taught that freedom must be earned, that peace must be justified. But here, in solitude, there are no conditions. She does not have to be perfect to deserve her own company. She does not have to be loved to feel whole. She simply breathes, and that is enough. And yet, this freedom comes with its own trials. To stand alone is to face the full weight of one's own reflection without distraction. It is to confront every insecurity, every wound that companionship once helped to hide. The world, when empty of voices, echoes your own too clearly. But instead of running from that echo, she begins to listen. She learns that the ache within her chest is not loneliness. It is life expanding. It is the space where something new is trying to be born. Through this listening, she starts to see that solitude is not a punishment, but a teacher, one that demands honesty. There is no pretending here, no performance. She must face the truth of who she is, not who she hoped to become, not who others expected her to be. And yet, in that confrontation, something miraculous happens. The fear begins to soften. The judgment begins to fade. What was once unbearable becomes beautiful in its simplicity. The climb then becomes less about progress and more about presence. Each step is an act of awareness. Each breath is an acknowledgement of the moment as it is. She learns that she does not have to force her way forward. The path is not a ladder, it is a dance. Sometimes she moves upward, sometimes she rests, sometimes she slips back down the slope. None of it matters. The mountain is patient, and so she learns to be too. There is a wisdom that arises only when the world grows quiet, a kind of clarity that can't be taught, only discovered. It comes when you finally stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What is?" It is the shift from control to trust. She begins to see that every difficulty, every loss, every silence was never meant to break her, but to strip away what she didn't need. Life, it turns out, was never withholding anything. It was refining her. In this realization, she begins to move differently. There is no longer the desperate hurry to arrive anywhere. No more waiting for someone to give her permission to rest, to change, to begin again. She starts to trust the unfolding of things, to understand that even the pauses, the moments of stillness, are part of the music. And it's here, in this quiet balance, that she begins to feel something that has no name. It is not happiness exactly, nor is it relief. It is a deep calm that feels like recognition, as if life itself were exhaling through her, as if every struggle had led to this one simple truth: she belongs. Not because she has earned it, but because she is. This belonging is not dependent on anyone's presence. It is not something that can be given or taken away. It exists in her like gravity, holding her steady. She no longer searches for the light outside her, she carries it. And in carrying it, she begins to see the world differently. Even the mountain, once so vast and intimidating, now feels like a reflection of her own spirit, silent, strong, unbending, and alive. You see, the great secret is not in conquering solitude, but in surrendering to it, in realizing that the silence she feared was never emptiness, it was space for her to finally hear the rhythm of her own being, to know that she does not need to be carried because she has always had wings. There comes a day when the climb no longer feels like ascent, but like return. Not a journey towards something new, but back to something ancient, something that was always there, buried under years of noise and striving. She begins to notice how much of her life had been built around seeking approval, seeking meaning, seeking a sense of place in a world that never truly paused to see her. But solitude has a way of unmasking illusions. It strips away the layers of pretending until there is nothing left to hide behind. At first, this exposure feels raw, even cruel. To be alone is to face the echo of everything you've avoided. It is to sit with every unanswered question, every loss, every piece of yourself you thought you had escaped. The quiet does not comfort you at first. It confronts you. But confrontation, she learns, is not cruelty. It is invitation. The silence starts to shape her in subtle ways. Without distraction, her thoughts slow, and what once felt chaotic begins to find order. She notices the small things again, the sound of her breath, the warmth of sunlight on her hands, the way the world continues effortlessly without her interference. There is a humility in that observation, a realization that life moves not because of control, but in spite of it. Control, she sees now, was the great illusion. For so long she believed peace would come when everything around her finally made sense, when the puzzle of existence fit neatly together. But life is not a puzzle. It is a current. It does not need to be solved, only entered. The river does not wait for permission to flow, and neither does she. As the days pass, something within her begins to loosen. The tightness in her chest, the weight of expectation, the endless need to justify her worth, they all start to fall away. Solitude reveals that much of what she carried was never hers to bear. The world had taught her to be everything but herself, to please, to endure, to chase ideals that were never her own. Now, in the absence of all that noise, she begins to ask a different kind of question. If I were not performing, who would I be? The answer doesn't come as words, it comes as presence, a quiet knowing that hums beneath her skin, reminding her that the essence of who she is cannot be earned, only remembered. She realizes that she has spent her life trying to become something, when all along she only needed to return to being. There's a peculiar peace in this recognition. It doesn't shout, it doesn't even feel triumphant, it simply is. A stillness that holds her without demand, without judgment. For the first time, she feels what it means to belong to herself, to be at home in her own presence. And that home, she discovers, is not built of walls or safety, but of truth. But even truth can be uncomfortable. It shows her the ways she abandoned herself for acceptance, the times she silenced her intuition to avoid rejection, the moments she chose comfort over authenticity. Yet instead of guilt, she feels compassion. She understands now that all those compromises were born from fear, the fear of being alone. And in facing that fear, she finds freedom. There's a strength that grows from that freedom, not the kind that resists or fights, but the kind that stands quietly and endures. The kind that no one applauds because it isn't visible to the world, but it is the most real thing she's ever known. It's not the strength to conquer, but the strength to remain. The mountain she once saw as external now feels internal. Its cliffs are her doubts, its storms her emotions, its vastness her untamed mind. And every step she takes within herself brings her closer to something sacred. She understands now that solitude isn't the absence of love, it's the ground in which love takes root. A love not dependent on another's gaze, but one that radiates from within, unshakable, whole. There's a moment, perhaps after many nights alone, when she feels the quiet shift from loneliness to serenity. The emptiness she once feared has turned into space. Space for creation, for clarity, for the subtle joy of simply existing. She doesn't crave to be seen anymore. She wants to see. She doesn't wait to be understood. She begins to understand. The climb, she realizes, was never about reaching the top, but about descending deeper, below the noise, below the names, below the need to prove anything. Down there, in the heart of her solitude, she finds what the world could never give, herself unfiltered, unbroken, and enough. And in that moment she knows, this was never a journey toward strength. It was a journey toward peace, because true strength does not shout. It does not need to be seen or measured. It is the quiet endurance of being fully present with oneself, even when no one else is watching. There is a particular stillness that comes after the storm of becoming. It arrives quietly, like dawn over a restless sea, when all the striving begins to fade, and something inside finally exhales. She has climbed, fallen, broken, rebuilt, and now she begins to understand that the journey was never about reaching a summit at all. The mountain was never there to be conquered, but to reveal what within her could not be destroyed. In this stillness, a new kind of awareness unfolds. She sees that so much of life had been spent chasing the next thing, the next goal, the next validation, the next fleeting moment of control. Always forward, always outward, as if peace were something hidden just beyond reach. But solitude teaches her that peace has no direction. It does not wait at the end of effort. It exists beneath it. It was there all along, obscured only by her need to search for it. She begins to move through the world differently now, with a slower grace, with eyes that see not for answers but for understanding. The quiet moments no longer frighten her. They feel like home. The world that once seemed chaotic and loud now appears to her as a vast and delicate rhythm. Everything in its own time, everything in its own balance. She realizes that life does not demand perfection. It only asks presence. Presence, she learns, is the rarest form of strength. It is not about control or resistance, but surrender, a deep and unwavering trust in what is. When she allows herself to be fully present, to listen instead of demand, to witness instead of chase, she discovers that life itself begins to speak to her. Not in words, but in the subtle language of being, the way the wind moves through the trees, the way silence holds its shape, the way her own breath seems to echo with something ancient. And in that dialogue, she starts to understand that there was never separation between herself and the world. The mountain, the ocean, the stillness. These were not symbols of something beyond her. They were mirrors of what she already is. Everything she admired in nature, its patience, its resilience, its quiet power, was not outside her. It was her. She was made of the same elements, moved by the same unseen current. For the first time, she feels what it means to belong to the world without needing to own any part of it. She can walk through her days without clutching, without fear of loss, because she sees now that nothing real can be taken. What is essential does not exist in form. It breathes in awareness. And this awareness changes the way she loves. Love, once something she chased or feared, becomes something she embodies. It is no longer dependent on another's presence or approval. It moves through her, not towards something, but from something, from a fullness she didn't know she had. When she gives love now, it is not an offering to be returned, but an overflow, a quiet radiance that asks for nothing. The people around her notice the change, though few can name it. There is a calmness to her now, a steadiness that cannot be shaken by circumstance. She no longer fights to be understood, nor does she cling to being seen. She understands that true connection cannot be forced. It blooms naturally when two souls meet without pretense. In solitude, she had once felt the ache of absence. Now she recognizes it as space, space where creation begins. She realizes that what she once called loneliness was not emptiness at all, but potential, the fertile ground where clarity grows. And clarity is what she carries now, like a quiet flame. It does not burn fiercely, but it never goes out. There are still moments of doubt, of course. Even the most grounded trees sway in the wind. But now, when uncertainty comes, she does not fight it. She lets it move through her, knowing it will pass. She has learned that peace does not come from the absence of chaos, but from no longer being ruled by it. There is a strength in gentleness she had never known before. The world often mistakes softness for weakness, but she has come to see that gentleness is the most powerful form of resilience. It bends without breaking. It allows without losing form. It endures without hardening. Her strength is not the strength of armor. It is the strength of water, quiet but unstoppable. In this new understanding, her life begins to align with a different rhythm. She no longer measures her days by achievement, but by awareness. She does not ask, "What did I accomplish?" but "Was I awake to it?" Because she knows now that the purpose of being alive is not to gather, but to experience, to truly see, feel, and inhabit the miracle of existing. And so, she continues her walk, not upward, not forward, but inward. Each step taken not to escape the world, but to merge with it. The mountain is no longer a challenge to overcome. It has become her path, her teacher, her reflection. There is a quiet certainty in her now, a knowing that she needs nothing to complete her. What she once sought in love, in validation, in belonging, she has found in the simple act of being. The climb has ended, but the journey has only just begun. The endless unfolding of awareness meeting itself moment by moment, breath by breath. And in that unfolding, she understands at last. She was never meant to be carried, for she was never lost. She was only learning how to stand still enough to feel the earth moving beneath her, reminding her that she was and always will be home. There comes a season, quiet and unannounced, when she no longer measures time by what has been lost or gained. The days unfold without urgency, as if the world itself has slowed its breath to match her own. She moves differently now, less like someone chasing life, and more like someone listening to it. There is a grace that comes only when the storm has passed, when the noise of wanting begins to fade, and the silence of knowing takes its place. She has begun to understand that healing is not a single event, but a slow, almost invisible turning. It is not the dramatic shattering and rebuilding that stories often promise, but the steady softening of what was once hardened by fear. There was a time she believed healing meant becoming who she used to be, returning to some imagined version of herself before the hurt. But solitude has shown her that healing is not a return. It is a transformation. The person she was before no longer exists, and that is not tragedy, but truth. In the long stretches of silence, she learns to see her past not as something to escape, but as something to understand. Every failure, every heartbreak, every moment of loss, each one was a teacher disguised as pain. They were never punishments. They were invitations to see what was true beneath the surface, to meet herself without the mask of control. And the more she listens, the more she realizes that nothing was wasted. The tears, the confusion, the sleepless nights, they were all necessary parts of a conversation between her and life. Because life, she sees now, is not cruel or kind. It simply reveals. It reveals who you are when everything else is stripped away. In that revelation, she begins to forgive herself. Not in words, but in how she breathes, in how she no longer rushes to fix or explain. Forgiveness, she learns, is not a gesture of virtue. It is a release. It is the quiet acceptance that things could not have been any other way, that she could not have known then what she knows now. Forgiveness is what allows the heart to stop rehearsing pain. As she walks through her days, she finds herself noticing small things again. The way sunlight pools across the floor, the rhythm of her footsteps, the hum of distant voices. Ordinary details, once invisible, now seem radiant. It's as though the world has not changed at all, yet everything feels different because she has changed. She sees now not through the eyes of someone searching for meaning, but through the eyes of someone who has found it. Meaning, she realizes, is not something discovered. It is something lived. It is created in the act of paying attention, in being present to the subtle symphony of existence. The world does not hand us purpose. It mirrors it back when we learn to look without expectation. This realization brings her a new kind of freedom, quiet but profound. She no longer needs to prove her worth by constant motion or achievement. She can rest without guilt. She can exist without justification. The silence that once terrified her has become her companion. It no longer speaks of absence, but of presence, an invisible fullness that sustains her even when she is alone. And yet, there are still moments when the old ache returns, a sudden wave of longing, a shadow of the woman she used to be. But instead of fighting it, she welcomes it. She knows now that growth is not linear. Healing is not permanent victory. It is a dance between remembering and releasing. Sometimes she falls back into old fears, but now she falls gently, without despair. She knows the way back to herself. The gift of solitude is not that it eliminates pain, but that it teaches her how to hold it differently. She no longer sees her sorrow as an interruption, but as part of the same fabric as joy. Both come and go like tides, and she has learned to let them. Resistance was the source of her suffering, not the feeling itself. The more she allows life to flow through her, the less it hurts. In this flow, she starts to notice how much of her strength lies not in endurance but in tenderness. She can face the world now without armor. Vulnerability is no longer a weakness to hide, but a doorway to connection. She understands that to be open is not to be unguarded. It is to trust that even when she breaks, she will not shatter. Her solitude has become something sacred, not isolation, but sanctuary, a space within herself where she can return again and again, no matter how chaotic the world becomes. It is there, in that inner stillness, that she feels closest to the pulse of existence itself. And in that nearness, she recognizes something that words can only circle around. Peace is not the end of struggle. It is the still point within it. From this place, her life begins to unfold differently. She no longer plans her future as an escape, but as an expression. She no longer looks for love to complete her, but to share her abundance. Every encounter, every conversation, every quiet morning becomes part of a larger pattern she no longer needs to understand. It is enough to live it. The woman who once trembled at the idea of being alone now stands unshaken in her solitude. Not because she has mastered it, but because she has surrendered to it. She knows that she will continue to change, that uncertainty will visit again, and that even peace will come and go like the tide. But she also knows this. Beneath every rise and fall, there is something steady, an awareness that watches, waits, and whispers, "You are still here." And in that whisper lies the truest freedom, not the freedom from life's weight, but the freedom to carry it lightly, to know that she can stand on the edge of everything she has lost and still see beauty stretching endlessly before her, because she no longer fears the silence. She has learned to speak its language. There comes a time, often after the long quiet of self-discovery, when she begins to re-enter the world, not as who she once was, eager, uncertain, seeking approval, but as something calmer, steadier, like a river that has finally learned the shape of its own bank. She doesn't rush toward anything now. She moves with intention, with awareness. The world hasn't changed, but her eyes have. What once seemed chaotic now feels like rhythm, and what once felt like emptiness now feels like space. She walks through familiar streets and hears the same noises, the same chatter, the same urgency of people trying to reach somewhere faster. Yet she no longer feels the same pull to keep up. She understands now that life was never a race but a current, and currents, if you fight them, will drown you. She has learned to move with them instead, to trust that even the twists and detours have their place. There was a time when she thought surrender meant defeat, to yield, to let go, to stop pushing. These were things she feared. But surrender, she has come to realize, is not giving up. It is alignment. It is the quiet courage to stop resisting what already is, to open one's hands and let the river carry you where it must. For years she had fought against life, believing peace would come once she gained control. But peace is not control, it is the absence of it. As she lives this truth, she begins to feel an ease she has never known. Decisions that once felt heavy now come naturally, as if guided by something larger than thought. The noise of indecision softens because she no longer needs to have everything figured out. She trusts herself to move, even without knowing what lies ahead. That trust becomes the new foundation, the invisible ground beneath her steps. With this trust comes clarity. Not the kind that arrives in sudden revelation, but the kind that grows quietly, like light spreading through water. She sees now that the search for meaning was never about finding answers, but about learning how to listen. The universe speaks in the small things, in the timing of a meeting, the delay of a plan, the pull of intuition. Everything that once felt random now carries a whisper of order. There are still moments of doubt, moments when the old mind returns with its familiar anxieties and questions. But she no longer believes every thought that passes through her. She knows the mind is only a storyteller. weaving tales out of fear and habit. The difference now is that she listens without identification. The thoughts pass like clouds over an open sky, and she remains the sky, untouched, unshaken. This shift changes how she relates to others. She no longer enters relationships from hunger, but from wholeness. She doesn't need someone to complete her because she no longer feels incomplete. Love, in this new understanding, is not a rescue. It is a meeting. Two beings who are whole in themselves, choosing to share the same light for a while. And when love ends, as all things eventually transform, she no longer falls apart. She grieves, she feels, but she does not collapse. For she knows now that what ends is form, not essence. Even in endings, she finds grace. The same grace that solitude taught her, the grace of letting go. Life, she realizes, is a series of continual releases. People, identities, dreams, versions of oneself. To resist them is to live in pain. To allow them is to live in peace. It is not detachment that gives her freedom, but acceptance. This acceptance does not make her passive. On the contrary, it makes her more alive than ever. Because she no longer acts from fear or lack, her actions become clear, deliberate, full of quiet power. She doesn't chase opportunity, she creates space for it. She doesn't force change, she allows transformation to unfold. The difference is subtle but profound. She moves with life, not against it. And as she moves this way, she begins to notice something almost mystical. Life responds. Doors open without effort. Encounters happen at just the right moment. What used to feel like coincidence now feels like conversation, an intimate dialogue between her and the world. The more she trusts, the more the world mirrors that trust back. There is a serenity in this way of being that no external achievement could ever offer. She still faces challenges, but they no longer define her. She can experience chaos without becoming chaotic, pain without becoming bitter, loss without becoming lost. That is what real strength looks like, not invincibility, but presence, the ability to stay open in the face of uncertainty. One evening, she finds herself standing before the same horizon she once feared, a vast sky stretching endlessly beyond what she can see. But now, there is no fear, only wonder. The mountain she once climbed, the solitude that once weighed heavy, all of it was preparing her for this. The quiet understanding that she was never separate from any of it. The mountain was her, the climb was her, the silence was her. Everything she sought outside had always been inside. And so she stands there, not as a woman waiting for something to happen, but as someone who has learned to be with what is. She feels the wind brush her face, the ground steady beneath her feet, and she realizes that this simple presence is the miracle she had been seeking all along. She smiles, not because she has arrived, but because she finally understands there is nowhere to arrive to. The destination was never a place, it was awareness. It was this moment, endlessly unfolding, teaching her again and again the same quiet truth. She was never meant to be carried. She was meant to remember she could walk, not above the earth, but with it. There is a turning point in her journey, one that does not arrive with fireworks or revelation, but with an almost imperceptible calm. It happens on an ordinary morning, when the sun filters softly through the window and everything feels strangely still. No struggle, no reaching, no ache to fix or become. Just a quiet knowing that what she has been searching for has been here all along, woven into the simple rhythm of being alive. She sits with her coffee, watching the world outside her window, people rushing to work, children laughing in the street, the hum of life carrying on as it always has. For the first time, she does not feel apart from it. She is not observing the world as something to decipher or escape, but as something she belongs to. Every sound, every movement, every fleeting moment feels like part of the same pulse she carries within her. It's then that she begins to understand the real essence of freedom. It isn't the absence of responsibility, nor is it a detachment from others. It's the ability to move through life without the weight of constant resistance, to be in the world and not against it. She sees now that much of human suffering comes from the belief that things should be different than they are, that peace will only come once life bends to our will. But peace, she realizes, isn't something you earn by changing life. It's something you uncover by changing how you see it. This shift transforms everything. Small inconveniences no longer carry the same gravity. The things that once triggered her, the delays, the disappointments, the uncertainties, now pass through her like wind through open hands. She feels life more directly, without the filter of expectation. This isn't numbness, it's clarity. To see things as they are, without distortion, is the beginning of wisdom. She begins to notice how deeply the world clings to the idea of control. Every plan, every ambition, every effort to guarantee happiness is a form of grasping. Yet, the tighter we hold, the more life slips away. She has lived that cycle before, the endless striving, the exhaustion, the illusion of stability. And now, as she releases that grip, she feels something remarkable happen. Energy returns. Not the frantic energy of urgency, but the deep, sustainable vitality that flows when one stops fighting the current. In this new rhythm, her relationship with time changes as well. She no longer divides her life into before and after, into what could have been and what must come next. She understands that time is not a line she must chase, but an unfolding she can inhabit. Each moment contains everything. Each breath is a complete experience. When she walks, she walks. When she eats, she eats. When she listens, she listens. Not as a means to an end, but as an act of presence. And in this simplicity, joy begins to return. Not the fleeting kind that depends on circumstance, but the quiet joy that arises from being aligned with life itself. She finds beauty in things she once overlooked. The way light moves across a room, the texture of rain against glass, the unspoken kindness of strangers. Her senses sharpen, not through effort, but through attention. Attention, she discovers, is love in its purest form. To pay attention to something fully, to give it your presence without demand or judgment, is to love it. And when she gives her attention to life, life responds in kind. The ordinary becomes sacred. Every moment, no matter how small, reveals its depth. Yet this awakening is not without its challenges. There are days when old habits return, when fear whispers that she is falling behind, that she must chase something to stay alive. But she no longer listens with panic. She recognizes the voice of fear as part of her human inheritance. Loud, persuasive, but not true. She lets it speak, and then she lets it pass. Fear, when seen clearly, loses its authority. The world around her has not changed. People still hurry, still worry, still search for meaning in all the familiar places. But she walks through it with a kind of gentle detachment, not out of superiority, but out of understanding. She no longer needs to fix or convince anyone. Each person is on their own path of remembering. Some will fight their lessons, others will embrace them. All are moving, consciously or not, toward the same truth. That peace cannot be found elsewhere because it has never been lost. Her solitude, once sharp and echoing, has turned into quiet companionship. She feels connected to everything, even in her aloneness. There is a thread running through it all, the laughter of children, the falling of leaves, the steady heartbeat in her chest. That thread is life itself, unbroken, eternal, and she is part of it. Sometimes, at night, she stands by her window and looks at the stars. There was a time when they made her feel small, insignificant, but now she feels something different. She feels belonging. The stars are not distant anymore. They are reminders that the same fire that burns in them burns in her, that the vastness above is mirrored within. And so she begins to live not as a seeker, but as a participant. Her story is no longer about escape or arrival. It is about presence, to breathe deeply, to walk lightly, to love without ownership, to live without fear. She understands that nothing has to be extraordinary to be sacred. Every day, every moment, every heartbeat is enough. This is what it means to rise, not as a triumphant act of defiance, but as a quiet act of understanding. To rise is to return to simplicity, to awareness, to the effortless truth of being. She does not wait for life to be perfect anymore. She meets it as it is. And in doing so, she finds that it is already perfect. There comes a time when she stops calling it a journey at all. The word itself begins to feel misleading, as if life were a road with an end, or a mountain with a peak waiting for her to arrive. She realizes now that there is no arrival, only unfolding. The idea of a destination, of a final moment of clarity or completion, was part of the illusion that kept her running. Life was never asking her to reach something. It was asking her to be something. She wakes early one morning, long before the sun, and steps outside into the dim blue of dawn. The air feels alive, untouched. Everything is quiet, yet full of potential, the kind of silence that holds the promise of creation. She stands there, breathing it in, and feels an awareness rise from within, a quiet recognition. This is it. Not tomorrow, not after she has become wiser or freer or more accomplished. This moment right here is life happening. For years, she had thought presence was a concept, something to practice or attain. But presence, she now understands, is not a discipline. It's the natural state that exists when she stops trying to control everything. It's what remains when thought grows still and the heart listens. In this stillness, she no longer feels like the separate observer of her own life, but as if she has dissolved into the living pulse of it. There is no border between her and the world. The wind that brushes her skin, the rhythm of her breath, the soft hum of morning, they are all expressions of the same thing. From this awareness, her relationship with the past begins to transform. The memories that once haunted her no longer carry the same weight. She sees them not as wounds to be reopened, but as teachers that have finished their lesson. Regret has no place in a life that understands impermanence. Everything that happened, every mistake and loss, served its purpose, to bring her here, awake to what is. She begins to notice how memory changes when it's not chained to judgment. Events that once felt heavy start to shimmer with quiet meaning. Even the pain, when seen through the lens of understanding, feels sacred. It was all part of the shaping, the necessary friction that polished her spirit smooth. She doesn't need to forget or forgive. She simply accepts. The past no longer defines her. It breathes through her like air through open windows. The same transformation happens with her future. For the first time, she feels no urgency to predict or control what comes next. The need to plan every step, to force outcomes, fades into something gentler. She can still dream, still aspire, but her dreams are no longer rooted in lack. They grow from gratitude. She understands that what's meant for her cannot be missed, because she is no longer chasing life. She is aligned with it. This shift changes how she moves through her days. Work, love, conversation, everything becomes part of a single rhythm, fluid and alive. She is no longer performing the act of living. She is participating in it fully. The smallest acts, making tea, washing her hands, feeling the weight of the cup, become holy in their simplicity. She has discovered the sacred not in grand experiences, but in the depth of attention she brings to the ordinary. People notice something different about her now. She speaks less, listens more. Her words carry a certain calm that draws others in, though she does not try to teach or explain. She knows that truth cannot be given, only recognized. The most powerful lessons are the ones that arrive in silence. She finds herself drawn to quiet places, to forests, to oceans, to rooms where the only sound is breath. In these spaces, she feels a connection to something vast, something that doesn't need to be named. It is not religion or philosophy. It is life itself, conscious and infinite, whispering through every leaf and ripple. And she realizes that this connection was never broken. It only felt distant because she had stopped listening. Listening, she understands now, is the essence of wisdom. Not the kind of listening that waits to respond, but the kind that receives without interference. When she listens like that, to people, to nature, to her own heart, understanding arises naturally. It's as if truth doesn't need to be sought. It only needs to be heard. Her solitude, which once felt like a test, has become her sanctuary, but she no longer sees solitude as separate from connection. She knows now that aloneness and togetherness are not opposites. They are two expressions of the same unity. One cannot exist without the other. In solitude, she learns to know herself. In connection, she learns to express what she has known. Both are sacred. Both are necessary. There are moments still when the old patterns try to return, the mind whispering that she should do more, be more, hurry, but she smiles at them, like one would at an old friend who no longer has power. She has learned the difference between movement born from fear and movement born from alignment. Fear rushes, alignment flows. She has come to see that peace is not fragile. It doesn't shatter when the world grows loud or uncertain. True peace is not the absence of storms. It's the presence of an anchor. It's the quiet knowing that she can remain centered no matter how the tides shift. One evening, as she watches the sky turn gold and fade into dusk, she feels something within her expand. It's not joy exactly, nor is it sorrow. it's a profound sense of belonging. She realizes that the world has always been whispering this truth, that she is part of it, not by earning, not by proving, but by simply existing. The trees, the wind, the sky, they do not try to be, they simply are. And so is she. There is no enlightenment waiting in the distance, no final revelation waiting to complete her. The journey was never about finding light, it was about remembering she was never separate from it. The search ends not in answers, but in awareness. Awareness that this moment, in all its imperfection, is whole. Awareness that the self she was chasing has always been here, watching, breathing, waiting to be seen. And as night settles, she feels a deep stillness settle with it, a stillness that holds everything, even the unknown. For the first time, she feels no need to name what she feels. She simply lets it exist. Because at last she understands, peace is not something she found. It is what remained when she stopped searching.